also the makers of history. When you think of what makes history great, it is those history makers and makers of men. When you think of great men that have been made, there's a phenomenal generation that is happening at an institution called Morehouse College. The steward of Martin Luther King's legacy, the steward of Benjamin Mays, the steward of Gloucester Hall, the steward of Mighty Men, the steward of Edwin Moses, Olympian, the steward of the largest box office ever to take place on planet Earth, Samuel Jackson, Morehouse alumnus, those who've been able to let us know that the Klansmen do have a place in Black history, and that's being mocked. Spike Lee, a true creator whose body of work has inspired others like Tyler Perry to dream the impossible for Black culture. Yes, those men are made at Morehouse by none other than the 12th president, Dr. David Thomas. Welcome to A Seat at the Table.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Really appreciate this opportunity.
Well, we appreciate all that you do. Apple made some decisions and they decided to include you as part of the C2. When you think about that, what does that mean for Morehouse?
I think what it means for Morehouse is it really places us at the center of making sure that the current and developing generation of African Americans have an opportunity to compete and thrive in what is going to be the sector that drives the global economy for the rest of the 21st century. And that's really technology. And it starts with being competent in what I see as the fourth literacy. There's reading, there's writing, there's arithmetic, and there's coding. You know, just like you don't have to be a poet or a novelist to know how to write, right? You have to have facility with writing and reading. And you don't have to be a mathematician, but you got to understand how to add. Same thing I think is true for coding. It's a new kind of literacy because it drives technology, and technology is what's changing our lives across today, every company is a technology company. Even your company is a technology company.
Say it again.
Right? And you need people who understand that to help you expand your product. So that's what we're doing. And it also recognizes the fact that Morehouse has a long history of producing outstanding computer scientists and people in the technology field. So it's a natural for us.
When you think about Morehouse's Coding Hub, what do you want individuals to say? Morehouse Coding Hub is?
Morehouse Coding Hub is a place that is reaching the broad swath of young people in Atlanta who have the acumen for coding. Also, what I think will distinguish what we do around coding is the connection to social justice. And so we're already designing projects where rather than simply teaching students to code, we also ask them to think about and develop projects where using your coding skills helps you do something that will help your community. And, you know, right now we're in this environment of voting with the election coming up. If we had been engaged in this or announced as a hub 6 months ago, right now you'd see high school students working on projects designed to drive people to vote in the next election, because that's a social justice issue. And so we want to link our theme of social justice with this skill of coding and entering the technology-driven environment of the 21st century.
Super. You mentioned social justice, and I think that's important. At the same time, social justice has caused many corporations to want to give. When you think of Reed Hastings and Netflix, obviously one of the largest donations in the history of many institutions that are HBCUs. How important is it for us to receive those gifts? And what does it mean for these corporations to empower a Morehouse, a Spelman with these level of gifts?
Yeah. Well, I think it's extraordinarily important for us to receive these gifts. We are in the business of higher education, and 8-figure gifts are novelties in the world of historically Black colleges and universities. But at the best liberal arts colleges and universities, an 8-figure gift would barely make a headline. But they're making lots of headlines because they're finally coming to us. And I think what's important about it is that we are now getting gifts commensurate with the value that historically Black colleges and universities, and in particular schools like Morehouse and Spelman, have been providing to our nation and globally for over 100 years. If you take all of the endowments of the historically Black colleges, they are less than the endowment of any one of the top 50 endowed, predominantly white higher education institutions in our country. You put all our money together, you get $2.1 billion. You go to Harvard, you get $40 billion. You go to Princeton, you get $35 billion. I mean, you can just walk down the line. And what I like to remind my counterparts at some of those schools, because I've been associated with several of them, Yale, Columbia, Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, Georgetown, they all have one thing in common, or they have a number of things in common, but one of the things they have in common is they've all produced a president. I think at Morehouse, we produced Martin Luther King, so I think we're on par. They all have huge endowments, and that's the difference between them and us. And it explains everything that is different about them and us. And because if you look at contribution, prestige, right? My view, Princeton is the Morehouse of the North, right? We're not the Harvard of the South. And so now we're seeing gifts commensurate with that. And I would also say this, the avalanche that has brought these new 8-figure gifts started with Robert Smith. And before COVID. And there is a club called Billionaires, and he's a billionaire. And that club is just green. You're either a billionaire or you're not. Black, white, brown, indifferent. And I think some people, when he did that, some people started to look and say, wow, these HBCUs, we need to put an eye on them. And, Reed Hastings had actually already given Morehouse a 7-figure gift before he and his wife decided to give us the $40 million gift. What I think happened with COVID and the other pandemic that revealed itself in an undeniable way, which is institutional racism, was people like Reed stepped back and said, am I giving at a level that really allows this institution to scale what it is doing in the way that we've given to other institutions in the predominantly white institutional environment of higher education? And likewise for Mackenzie Scott. And I think when philanthropists really take seriously that they want to do something that significantly impacts what I call the last mile of reaching the American ideal, which is really around issues of race and social justice and access, we don't need any new organizations. We need to invest in the ones that have been doing the work and producing results and allow them to scale. And that leads you to places like Morehouse, Spelman, and other historically Black colleges and universities.
So if you had to describe the importance of alumni giving, how would you describe that as well?
I think alumni giving is a lifeblood. And these large gifts from philanthropists who aren't alumni, if you will, they produce the opportunities to have us, do extraordinary things that were on our planning schedule. Alumni dollars are what actually help us maintain our mission in good times and bad times. And for historically Black colleges and universities, alumni dollars are becoming even more critical because we can no longer be dependent on corporate dollars and charity dollars from other communities, as historically Black colleges, quite frankly, have been in the past. Very little of the philanthropy that has supported historically Black colleges and universities has actually come from the Black community. We have to reverse that. And that's what we've been working at Morehouse College. Our alumni giving is up 5% from last year, but we're only at about 18%. Our goal is to be at 40% over the course of the next 2 years, which will place us on par with other elite, highly selective liberal arts colleges.
How would you describe the future mission of Morehouse graduates if you were speaking to parents who were trying to make a decision on the future of their child and the mission that they would come out as related to their construct of how they see themselves?
So, and this is a great question because I talk to parents all the time. And I tell them, one, there is no future mission. The mission of Morehouse College will be, at least as long as I am president, the same mission it's had for 153 years. To educate and develop men with disciplined minds who will lead lives of leadership and service. And that Morehouse will be distinguished by two things. We produce Black male excellence at scale. There is no Morehouse mystique. There is a Morehouse idea. And that idea is that Black male excellence is an expectation, not an exception. And what people call the mystique is basically seeing Black men who expect to be excellent because they've spent 4 years surrounded by that expectation. And then they can go anywhere and deal with the bumps and bruises that come at you, no matter what profession you're in. But they have an inner compass. That's what we produce. We also have proven, and I say this to parents, that your son can go anywhere from Morehouse. We are the #1 producer of Black men with PhDs in STEM-related fields. I taught at the Harvard Business School for 22 years. #1 feeder of Black men to the Harvard Business School, Morehouse College. If you come to Morehouse College and you do well, and you want to go to business school, your chances of going to Harvard are better if you come from here than if you come from Harvard. So that's our value proposition. You can go anywhere from here. It's the only place on the planet that produces Black male excellence at scale and as an expectation. And we don't care what you go do with your life, you are obligated to lead and to serve. Very simple.
Yeah, I enjoy that, although I sold a lot of Mystique pens, that's for sure, and, the entire time. So I enjoy that. And that makes sense. When you think about COVID and how it's changed our community, how do you see us navigating this over the next 24 months?
Well, you know, that's a question that has a couple of layers to it, right? Because I have to think about it every day in the running of a college. And, you know, right now we are fully remote. We don't have any students on campus. And that's a challenge for Morehouse because for 153 years, we've sat on the highest hill in Atlanta. And our motto has been, young men come and they spend time on this hill and then they go out into the world. So, but we also realize that what we have to put first is the health and safety of our students. The good news is that has allowed us to learn how to really leverage virtual platforms to provide a high quality educational experience, but even more to create Morehouse community and not to lose its uniqueness. And that's really excited us because it's introduced to us how we can do even more for the world by leveraging these virtual platforms. but we are hoping to come back residential in February for our spring semester. This COVID, I call it the COVID moment, has also, made us very aware of the fact that Morehouse, because 90% of our students are from the Black community, we are serving the community that is being disproportionately negatively impacted by COVID. So I've had students who've lost parents. We haven't lost any students, but I've had students who've had the virus, staff members, and that's also made us, very aware of the vulnerability of the community that we serve, and therefore our obligation to do everything we can to keep them safe. And I think we'll come out of this stronger. I think you can't separate the COVID pandemic and what it's revealed from the other pandemic that has been laid bare, and that is the pandemic of systemic and institutionalized racism. And the COVID result shows us that it's not just about policing. It's also in our healthcare systems, it's in our employment systems, right? And, the positive thing for Morehouse is that we are actually built for this moment. Other institutions will survive despite it. We will thrive because of it, because it's pointing out to us that the world needs Morehouse more now than it ever has.
Great. For someone who has never met you, how would you describe your leadership style and your mentoring and being in that seat? Because the seat that you're in, there have been some dynamic shapers of men. And obviously you are now in the pilot seat of the futures of probably the next 100 years of how America will see leadership, given that you have right now Morehouse men leading from Birmingham, literally, mayors who are young and clearly see service as a part. You've got men like Bakari who are definitely there. Based on your style, how will you shape these young men moving forward?
I don't know how much homework you did on me, but if you did even a little bit, you know that I've actually made my career as an academic writing about leadership and the intersection of leadership and race and organizational change. So I'm very conscious of the fact that leaders often have the least accurate view of themselves. So, I say this as self-perception rather than, my ability to look in the mirror and see clearly. But I think that I balance confidence, ambition, and humility. And I try to bring that to my leadership. We need to be ambitious. We need to be confident that we can get there, and we need to be humble. And humility leads you to listen to people. And I'll give you a good example. Since we've been in this COVID environment, almost every important decision I made, the original decision that I was gonna make, I actually changed. Not because I lacked confidence, but because I was humble enough to listen to others and to see new data. We were the first school in Division I and Division II to cancel fall football, which I didn't know until I announced it. And then the next day, my phone was blowing up with people wanting to interview me from the networks. And a reporter told me in the first interview that we were the first ones. And so we're confident. I don't lack self-esteem, but I try to be humble. And that humility is expressed mostly in the fact that I think people would say that I listen. Relative to the Morehouse tradition of leaders, many of whom have been amazing clergy, like Benjamin Mays, Bob Franklin, John Wilson, I think people would say that I'm relatively quiet. But I am very decisive and very clear. And that's the way, and again, I come back to, I'm ambitious. I'm thinking big about Morehouse. The judgment of how good a president I've been at Morehouse won't be in until 20 or 30 years after I'm done. Because I'm thinking about making, what will I have done that made sure that 30 years from now, Morehouse is a juggernaut globally.
Super. Last question. What exactly made you or suggested between you and God why you wanted to be president of Morehouse College?
It's an answer that has multiple layers. Layer one was romantic. I wanted to go to Morehouse from the time I was 10 years old and read about Martin Luther King. Nobody in my family had gone to college. I used to work with my father. He had a business, a janitorial service, cleaning office businesses at night. He used to make me go with him from the time I was 5 years old. I started out doing ashtrays, graduated to sweeping floors, and then the worst job in the janitorial service, doing toilets. And he used to say, "You hate this." And, I'm 64 years old, so I'm from an era where you would never say back, "Yeah, I hate it." You just grunt. He'd say, "Well, if you go to college, you don't have to do this." And I thought to myself, I don't know what college is. I don't know anybody who's been, but I know I'm going. And I read about Martin Luther King, and he had gone to Morehouse. I said, I'm going to Morehouse. I applied to 2 colleges, got into both. Morehouse didn't give me any money. The other place gave me a full ride. So the romantic part is, took me 50 years, but I got here. The other part of it is just connected to how I've made decisions throughout my life, which is to ask the question, where can I make the most difference? And at the time Morehouse came knocking, they had some significant challenges. And I thought if I was as successful at Morehouse as I've been in the other places I've spent my career, I could make a bigger difference at Morehouse than if I stayed in the cushy life of an Ivy League professor or dean of a business school, which was a great life. And I think in those roles, I made a difference, but I just thought that the difference I can make at Morehouse, if I'm equally successful, is outsized. You know, and when you think about how small Morehouse is in its physical reality, there's only 2,200 students here. We only have a 66-acre campus. And then you look at how large it looms in the minds of people who think about higher education, who think about Black men, Black male excellence. If we can amplify that, right? Imagine a world where when you see a group of Black men, your assumption is the same assumptions you have about Black men when you're on the Morehouse campus. I think we wouldn't have George Floyd. We wouldn't have Ahmaud Arbery. Because even in society's interactions with Black men, there would just be a different set of starting assumptions. So, you know, if I can make this fly, right, no place better to be.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. David Thomas, for all that you've given and continue to give. And obviously, you know, as a Morehouse man, I believe that we've got the best man for the job right now. Thanks for sharing your vision. Thanks for sharing your mission here to see at the table. Couldn't have said it better. And love the realignment and all that you've given and shared with me. It means a lot. So thank you so much for coming to a seat at the table here at Rolling Out.
Thank you. And, you know, as the author of 3 books, a name means everything. And a seat at the table is a powerful name. So I appreciate you having me as part of it.
Thank you so much.
All right.